On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, we're going to dive into what every Thunder player has to add to their game this season and how it would help Oklahoma City, including the big three who can still improve.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're getting near the start of the NBA season. I'm your host, Rylan Stiles, host of Locked On Thunder, Locked On NBA Game Night, inside the Thunder NSI beat writer, as well as media member for quite some time now. We're diving into what every player on this roster can add to their game. What does that unlock for the team if it all does happen? And how important is it for this skill set to be added? Thank you so much for making us your first listen. You everydayers make the show happen here on Locked On Thunder. Joining us today is Michael Martin at Michael on Sports across social media. Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube. And Michael, we are nearly back. It has been the dog days of the offseason, but now you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. We'll have Sam Presti's press conference coming up next week. We'll have media day and training camp the following week, and then we're only 2 weeks out from preseason. So I will hesitantly say we're back. We're back in the swing of things.
We're back. I mean, we're talking about what guys can get better. We're going to get into media day, like you mentioned. We're going to have some fun questions for that. My question for you is, we always ask, what are the guys who've improved at? What have they added to their bag? Going into next season, what have you added to your game?
Well, I've added quite a bit. You know, a new lifestyle for me personally, but that's not important right now. I think that you're going to enjoy what we have coming up on Locked On Thunder, which will be brand new once training camp gets here, to kind of add to the show on top of the Monday through Friday format and the weekend games that we cover, all 82. So that'll be a lot of fun. And then we'll join into what the rest of the improvements can be moving forward. But for this Thunder team, when you're looking at this team from top to bottom, what's so interesting is they just won a championship. They ran back this entire roster. And yet, even after climbing the mountaintop of the NBA, every single person to varying degrees can still improve themselves to where in this parity era we found ourselves in, for the first time in NBA history, by the way, that we're in a parity era where the past 7 champions have failed to make it out of the second round. This Thunder team is truly different in that sense, not only because of their high roster retention rate, only losing Dylan Jones from last year's standard roster team, but because of the foundational pieces that we're going to talk about and how they can get better. Let's start with Shai. Shai, of course, just led the league in scoring. He was the NBA MVP, Western Conference Finals MVP, and NBA Finals MVP. So clearly his next goal or his next additive to his game isn't all that important, because if he just is going to flatline with where he was last year, which I don't think he will, because every single season that we've watched him play, he's added something. Last year, he improved his playmaking to get to those new heights. But even if he just is what he was last year, that's more than perfect for his role and for this team. But is there something about Shai's game that you're hoping we see this season?
Yeah, I mean, what he improved on last year with the playmaking, I hope that he continues to build on that. I think that's the one thing sort of holding him back from some of these other guys. Like, he's still one of, if not the best player in the league. But I think that playmaking aspect of being able to hit guys just all over the floor, being able to make your teammates a little bit better, I think is the one last piece. I don't know how much of that is a high level of guys like Luka, LeBron, Jokic, and those guys, how much that is just something they're born with, how much you can develop. But I think him going one more level up as a playmaker could really, really help this team and just make him that much more unstoppable as an offensive force, where you can't leave him alone, you can't double team him now. What can you do with this guy? So I think I would go with playmaking.
I think that playmaking is a good option for Shai, and if he can build on last year and truly refine it, then you get to a point with SGA where he can take that next step as a true point guard. I can't shake what we've talked about before this summer of your hot take heading into this year being that he could get to 50, 40, 90 club status. And I think that if you just kept the playmaking improvements last year that he made, where he was a more adventurous passer, I mean, one of his biggest highlights were passing plays where threw the behind the head pass to Dort for 3, and he squirted the ball through the legs of the Timberwolves to get a bucket for OKC. Like, if he just kind of remains steady at playmaking, but then adds a near or at 40% 3-point shot on true good volume, it creates this dynamic for a defender who already he's impossible to guard. He's in that unguardable class. But if he can just pull up off a screen in the pick and roll from 3, or he can walk the ball down and shoot a 3 immediately into a possession and knock it down, at that point, where do you even begin to defend Shai? I mean, do you have to pick him up full court, as you saw Indiana try to do in the finals, and that was very taxing for them? They had to switch out of that at the latter part of that series. Do you try to pick him up still at the elbow and just say, hey, we'll live with whatever threes that you can hit? You then try to pick him up right when he crosses half court, and then he can try to slither his way past you because you can't stay in front of him for that long with all that room to roam. So I just wonder, what would it look like if he added a true like 40%, 39%, somewhere in there, 3-point shot. And that can simply come with like better 3-pointers, like not as many step backs, or just being excellent at step back threes as well. So we'll see what he looks like from 3 and what he looks like as a playmaker. But I don't think that like anything that Shai adds, I think that's just a cherry on top. I don't think it necessarily unlocks something tremendous for this team, unless he went to the nth degree on either one of our points. Like, if he becomes an elite playmaker, then that does unlock things for OKC. If he becomes an elite 3-point shooter, that does unlock things for OKC. But it's not that realistic to expect that from Shai. So I don't expect that to change a ton of how this team looks. However, the next 2 guys of Chet and J-Dub, I do think really can thoroughly change what this team looks like in the postseason, and goes from, you had to do a 7-game series with Denver, had to do a 7-game series with Indiana, into more of a consistent, dominating force. If these 2 guys can take a step forward. With J-Dub, I have a twofold answer for this. I used to kind of default to 3-point percentage for a lot of these guys, because this team was 13th out of 16th in the playoffs last year from 3. So if they can improve from 3, it does create less hairy situations. But for J-Dub, I'm going to pivot, and I think that if he can become more self-created offensively on the ball, especially in that secondary unit, it does change what's required from Mark and from the Thunder team to put lineups around him. He's already good at it, but if he can take a step to be truly great at self-creation, I think that it unlocks a new dynamic of him as a scorer, because we saw him in the playoffs get downhill better, get to the free throw line better than he did in the regular season. And in the regular season, he was an all-star and all-NBA player. So I think that if that continues, plus he can now truly create that mid-range jumper for himself on top of hitting the give-me threes that are just going to happen due to Thunder's offense putting you in a bind offensively, and you're going to have lapses in the rotation. Then, for example, I've been thinking that Isaiah Hartenstein would be the best pairing for J-Dub because of his screen setting ability and his ability to free J-Dub up with a wipe away screen, whereas Shai, he can pair with Chet whenever you need to break those 4 guys up through the course of a 48-minute game, because Chet doesn't set those kind of wipe away screens, but Shai also doesn't need those wipe away screens, and he can value more of a pick and pop guy, a slip screen guy next to him. So can J-Dub get to a level of self-creation that is closer to a traditional number 1 option? And if that's the case, and you have 2 guys who can do that, you're in a position that NBA teams rarely ever in the history of the league find themselves in.
Yeah, the first team that comes to mind, which this is not a great comp, was those Harden Rockets teams with Chris Paul, where you could just stagger them and always have an elite ball handler and shot creator on the floor. I don't think Dub is going to ever get to the level of those guys, or Shai at that specific skill, but there's definitely still a lot of growth plate for him. I think that we saw a lot of it in the playoffs, which it's just so hard to evaluate his playoffs knowing what we know about his wrist and how screwed up that was. Like you mentioned, the 3-point shooting, like you can look back and go, well, he needs to improve. It's like, well, he's going to improve just because his wrist will work. Like that's one of the biggest things. Somewhat connected to years of like self-creation. I want him to add a little bit more of a mid-post and a post-up game. I think that a lot of teams are putting smaller guys on him in a lot of these switches, and just how switch-oriented the Thunder make other teams have to be just because of how versatile their roster is. They can just force them into things like that. So, Dub, I really like the aggression we saw from him last year in the playoffs of being more forceful, pushing guys out of the way on these drives, being more impactful. But I'd like to see him a little bit more on those mid-ranges of his back-to-the-basket game, those little spin fades and things like that, because if he can start making those connected with your point about self-creation, if he can get that on his own and start making those shots, I don't really know what you do with him.
He puts himself in a really rarefied era as an already top 20 player in our top 100 list. And I think that that'll be kind of a consensus around all these lists, not just the locked on top 100 of him being a top 20 player. Then you're talking next year, if he does these things, he'd be in the top 15 of players. So you'd have 2 guys in the top 15. And the Thunder have 3 guys in the top 30 on our list. So it's a really strong foundation for what this team is. Coming up, though, I think that Chet Holmgren has the most to prove on his shoulders this season, and he can unlock the difference in repeating as a champion or continuing the parity era in the NBA for Oklahoma City. But first, I want to say right now, but good friends over at Open Phone, go check out Open Phone today, because if you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. And if you think about the last time that you had an urgent need, whether it be a plumbing service or an AC provider or whatever it was that you had to get right now, if the first person that you called didn't answer, did you just wait around? Probably not. You moved on and you got what you needed. And that's where Open Phone comes in. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communication, all from one app on your phone or computer. Open Phone lets you manage business calls and texts in a single app. It has a shared inbox feature, which is a game changer with your team being able to jump into conversations instantly without missing a beat. And their AI agent handles after-hour calls. It can answer commonly asked questions. It can capture leads for you, so you never miss a customer. Open Phone is offering my listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's OPENPHONE.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you have an existing service already, don't worry. Open Phone can port those over for you at no extra charge. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day, here talking Thunder basketball. And I look at this Thunder roster and I cannot help but think about what this team can look like, even though they did run it back this summer. And you look and you see the Rockets and the Nuggets and everyone else stealing headlines away from the champion because of how they've externally boosted their roster. This Thunder internal approach can really pay off for them, especially if you see Chet Holmgren take the next step. I think that Chet Holmgren's already a top 3 defender in the world with his skill set, with his production and his talent. And for as under the microscope as he was after coming back from that hip injury, you don't win this championship without his defensive presence throughout the entire postseason. So I think that part of his game is already solidified. Of course, you can refine some things, but it's solidified. Where I look at Chet is offensively. And I think that there's 2 categories where it's easy to put him into, but I think that one's more important than the other, and that is how close can Chet Holmgren get to those first 9 games? Where if you just pause the NBA after the first 9 games, and it's a very small sample size, but and you had to fill out your all-star teams and your all-NBA teams and your all-defensive team, Chet would have gone check, check, check on all of those metrics and all of those teams and awards and accolades. He would have been the defensive player of the year. He would have been a lot of things last year because of how different he looked. It wasn't just being a play finisher for Chet. He was able to play off the catch, get downhill, get to the free throw line, pull up in the mid-range, knock down threes at like a 40% clip in that stretch, and then, of course, play elite defense on top of it. But after that hip injury, of course, it didn't look the same at any level offensively because you were also trying to adjust to life next to Isaiah Hartenstein too. So another wrinkle on top of just getting back on the court healthy, you had to adjust to a whole new look that you've never had to play with before at the NBA level. And really, I mean, the only comparison you can make in Chet's life where he's played with another big man is Drew Timme. And we know that Drew Timme is not a true traditional center the way that Isaiah Hartenstein is. So I think that when you look at Chet, how much can he do off the catch this year? Whenever he gets the ball, thrown to him at the top of the key, can he put it one dribble on the floor, attacking a hard closeout, rising up in the mid-range? Can he get all the way to the rim and thus to the free throw line and generate easy points, either with a rim finish or a trip to the charity stripe for Chet? I think that if he can be somewhere in the vicinity of those first 9 games, then a half-court offense for OKC that labored in the postseason, stalled out at times, and almost cost you your first-ever championship is now kind of worry-free with what we've seen from Shai and J-Dub, and then if that happens for Chet over the course of this season and postseason, then adding Chet to that mix.
Yeah, I went in a similar direction. I cut up into three slices, but I think that they're all sort of connected, which is ball handling, shot creation, playmaking. If you can put the ball on the floor, that opens up all the other stuff. So tightening his handle, which then leans into the fact that he can create advantages for himself. That's the shot creation part. And then the playmaking, if teams are moving up on him where they're not going to give him easy shots, can you pass out of those situations? So I'm right there with you of what we saw from him last year pre-injury was really, really special. It's also a small sample size, as you mentioned. So what can he get to? How can he get back to that form? And then if we're going just a little bit outside of that, I would just say the overall three-point shooting, especially in the second half where he gets sort of worn down. We've seen that from him time and time again where he's a lot more efficient in first halves and second halves. I think that there's still a lot that he can improve at as a shooter. I think the mechanics are pretty good, but speeding that up and just being a little bit more consistent, I think could open up a lot of things for this team.
And I think that Chet, by definition, really define what this team can do when it comes to repeating as champions. Can he give you even more? And I think that he will. I think that Chet will have a breakout season from the standpoint of locally, we all understand he's capable of doing these things, but he's actually going to do them and put them into practice and production, and thus catch on from around the NBA and around the basketball world as a guy who came into the league before the two injuries that he suffered in the league as two freak accidents, that he came into the league already as a household name in the basketball world, going back to high school, into college, etc. Now, the next couple of names on this list, I think, are pretty easy to whiz through. With Lu Dort, to me, Lu Dort is the perfect player for his role. I think he's one of the best 3-and-D players you can get. I think that the national audience still has not caught up to how much he's dramatically improved from three. After the first glimpse of him in the bubble and early on in his career where he was not as efficient from three, but this time he is efficient and has the volume to go along with it, on top of being one of the best defenders in the world. The only thing that I can look at is the same thing I've looked at for the last 3 seasons, and I'm not expecting this at all. Of all the things on this list, this is the one that I've kind of waved the white flag on. But if it does happen, it can really help. Lu Dort's rim finishing. He had a career high last year, and his career high is 57% at the rim. Can he get better at the cup? Now, I think that part of that getting better that does not reflect in the percentages is the better quality of drives, where he did not just put his head down and drive. He didn't just take wild attempts at the rim. If it wasn't there, he passed out and kept the ball moving and allowed this Thunder offense to look better from that standpoint than previous years for him. But the production can still rise. I mean, he has the archetype, the build, the frame to be a much better rim finisher than he actually is. And he improved it last year, career high. Congratulations. But can you keep climbing up that staircase? Because everything else truly, for what you task Lu Dort with doing, to me is perfect.
Yeah, I would go as far as to say, we've talked about this off the pod, I think he's the best 3-and-D player in the world right now. And the 3-point shooting, yeah, you mentioned it, but there are a lot of people who still are like surprised when he's making shots. He shot 39% 2 years ago, and then 41% last year from three. This is a guy who's expected to take and make shots. Of course, he'll have the crazy ones like the Game 7 moon ball that he hit. That was just insane, but he's a guy who's going to make shots. I'm right there with you of this is really the last piece of things that are like attainable for him in a way as a player, because I think he's close to hitting his ceiling, which is a great thing. It's one of the best players in the world at his position at what he does. But I think the finishing is the last piece that we can all look at and go like, this feels like something you can still improve at without it being like a crazy big ask.
And then for these two, I did kind of cheat. And I cheated in different ways for both of them, Isaiah Hartenstein and Caruso. I'll rapid fire them and throw it back to you for these two guys, because I think that Isaiah Hartenstein, his is not even necessarily about himself, but it is connective. So with iHeart, sure, if he can shoot threes all of a sudden, and he's a guy who wants to be a 3-point shooter, and he went 0 for 22 last year from three, I'm out on Isaiah Hartenstein becoming a 3-point shooter. I don't think it's necessary, and I don't think it's going to happen. So I'm out on it, and maybe he'll surprise us, but I'll eat the crow when the time comes. I'm out on that being a thing for iHeart. But what I'm in on is, what if he does improve his chemistry with Isaiah Joe, and you look back at what he was able to do and unlock for Dante DiVincenzo's game? Can he do that same thing for Isaiah Joe? Can those two guys get on the same page with dribble handoffs, with Isaiah Joe coming off pin down screens? And can they set each other up in that regard? Because Isaiah Joe has to get better as a movement shooter. We'll talk about that coming up. But I think with iHeart, you're more so tasking him in almost a mentor role of getting those two guys connective, because that can really change the secondary unit as well, on top of what we talked about with J-Dub, on top of what we're going to talk about with some of the additions. I think that is a good pairing, and those two guys are kind of linked together in my mind, because I don't believe in iHeart's three-point shooting ability. Alex Caruso, this means nothing in the big picture, but can he be more consistent from three in the regular season? Can he be a guy who is back to that 40% from three in the regular season, 39% from three in the regular season? Last year he shot 36%, which is below his career average. But you go look at the year before in Chicago, he shot 40% from three on 4.7 attempts. So more attempts, better percentage last year in Chicago. This past year with OKC, it dipped down to 3 attempts per game on 35% shooting, which is below his career average. So where is he going to level off at in the regular season? Because he did come alive in the playoffs, and that's what's most important. But this one, again, doesn't necessarily mean a ton, because the regular season doesn't mean a ton for Caruso, as you saw a year ago, where he was kind of load managed with 54 games that he played for OKC. I think that is just a nice thing to add, not necessarily a requirement to add.
Yeah, I'll start with Hartenstein. First off, the three-point shooting, that's something I've been off of for a while, going back to when he signed initially. Of all his three-point makes that one year with the Clippers that people come back to a lot, most of his makes were in late fourth quarters when his team was up or down by 20. So I wouldn't hold my breath on any idea of him shooting threes. If he does, that's great, but they won without him doing that, so I don't think it's a big deal. I like your point about building some of the chemistry. I wouldn't even limit it to just Isaiah Joe. I think Aaron Wiggins would be a good piece for that. Topic, AJ, other guys. So if he can add that with any of those guys, I think that'd be great. But my point was just improving as a rim runner and rim rolling of some of these things, of where it's not just automatically he goes slides down to the pocket and then he's going to do a floater or he's going to pass off of it, but to be a more of a lob threat, I think could really, really help things. Then as far as Caruso, like, the things he can improve at aren't even really controllable things. Like, I would look at health, which, like, what are you going to do? You can't really do anything about that. And then just continued leadership with some of these guys. Like, if he can continue to make guys like Kaysen better and guys on the bench, I think that would be a massive piece of it. But for him individually, I don't know, other than, like you mentioned, just some of the three-point shooting. But both these guys are in a nice spot, even if they don't improve. But I think they'll come back with something.
Coming up, let's talk about the rotation and the depth pieces on this team and who could make the biggest jump this year that we're not expecting heading into the season. But first, I want to say right now, but good friends over at FanDuel, go check out FanDuel today, because the NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with these can't-miss offers. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Go check it out today, because if you're ready to play, you can download the FanDuel app or go to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. If you're only into the NBA, they still have NBA odds out there, including for opening night. Thunder Rockets, Thunder 6.5-point favorites. If you are into the NFL, though, this week of games is going to be fun. Washington, 3.5-point favorites, even without possibly Jaden Daniels against the Raiders. Go check that out today at FanDuel.com. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. We're going down the list of Thunder players who can improve this year and what that would mean for the Thunder. With Cason Wallace, to me, it's just knock down the gimmies. There's more to his game that he can do. You saw him explore more of an on-ball role last year, which was exciting, tapping back into his point guard background. But if he just makes it simple and knocks down those gimme threes that he's going to get, because this offense can generate him such wide open shots in the corner. If he can consistently knock those down, which he did his rookie year, didn't do last year, if he can get back to that on a higher volume because of how much better this offense is than it was his rookie season, then I think that he would then move up in the tier of players, and he would crack that top 100 list, and he would be regarded as another 3-and-D mold, which is good enough. I mean, I know that there's more out there. I know there's more ceiling there for Cason, but for right now, in the sense of trying to get this team to win back-to-back titles, if he just gets the gimmies, then it's going to be all right for OKC.
Yeah, just looking at his numbers, he's at about 3 attempts per game the last 2 years. He was 41% as a rookie and then about 35% last year. If he can just get to 5 attempts a game on like 37%, I think that would be awesome. I went in the direction of what you previously mentioned of just the playmaking, ball handling, shot creation on his end, of being a little bit more independent, where he's not just reliant on being set up, because obviously that's going to be his bread and butter, like you mentioned, of those gimmies, those knockdown shots. But if he can be somebody like you use in those second units where Dub and Shai don't have to handle the ball all the time, take some miles off those guys, while at the same time building some extra muscles in him for playoff time when you're going to need some of those things where the shot clock gets late, you got to improvise. I think that'd be really good from him. I'm really still high on Cason Wallace. And then the last thing I'll say is we hear this a lot. Now, I hope to ask him about this on Media Day, is that he's a natural guy. He doesn't watch a ton of film. I wonder if that's something he will add in a little bit in a different way. Not to say he doesn't watch any film at all. That'd be ridiculous. These guys are professionals. But to be a film junkie like a Caruso, like a Dort, what would that add for him?
I will say, and in my interview with him with awards season, he did say he doesn't watch any film at all, except for in the team setting. So it's it is crazy though that he's this elite of a defender, and he said he plays off of instincts and he plays off of the coaches, telling him from the sidelines, hey, shade this way, shade that way, whatever. Like that helps. The communication from his teammates helps, but it's not necessarily what we think of like grinding in the film room, learning these guys' go-to moves and shutting them down. It's just pure natural instinct. And that was, repeated in a separate room. Cason's not even around. J-Dub said the same thing about Cason, talking to him about Cason Wallace, of like he doesn't watch film a whole lot. If he does add that, can that make him even better? Or is he just so naturally gifted that like doesn't really change much? That is an interesting point to make about Cason Wallace. Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins, to me, very important, but rapid fire because I think it's very simple as well for these two guys. For Isaiah Joe, got to become a movement shooter, and you've got to become a volume shooter from three. And I think that those two things are interlined because you've seen it countless times where he's a really good stationary shooter, and he hits the gimmies every time when the offense just sets him up for a wide open three. But in the postseason and in big games when defenses are locked in and playing on a string, those stationary, hey, we're going to have J-Dub, we're going to have Shai, we're going to have Chet, we're going to have these guys draw a ton of gravity to them in the lane and then kick it out to you in the corner. In big moments, those defenses fly out there better and they fly out there more intently, and it disrupts what had been, for the course of an 82-game season, your bread and butter. So you've got to be able to do it in a multitude of ways, and I think that for Isaiah Joe, if he can do that, it would unlock a new level for him, because I think he's already a passable defender to be able to stay on the floor in big moments for this team, considering who they can put around him on that end of the floor. And if he can knock down threes consistently, we just talked about how their big deficiency a year ago was three-point shooting and half-court offense, and those two things can be fixed with simply Isaiah Joe being better as a movement shooter and becoming a true sharpshooter, not just in theory, but in practice. Aaron Wiggins is the same kind of tone of, if he can do this, he stays on the court. If he can defend fours and defend bigger bodies, something that he's admitted he's not comfortable with, and watching his game, you can clearly tell he's not comfortable with, but he's going to be asked to do it again. He's going to be asked to continue that trend to defend bigger forwards. If he can do that, then he stays on the floor. And if he stays on the floor, this is your third best shot creator on the team. This is a guy who can create offense and create points at all three levels, and helps your offense not stall out. Because that's the only thing that hindered this team from running through this league with 68 wins in the regular season to having some hiccups in the playoffs. The reason why the playoffs was not as dominant as the regular season was because when the game slowed down and the offense slowed down, it slowed down dramatically in Oklahoma City. That can change if these two guys improve those two skill sets, to me.
Yeah, you drilled into my head about Wiggins with guarding bigger players. We've talked about it a lot, so that's one of those major things, just giving these lineups a little bit more versatility. We know he's going to be asked to do that, like you mentioned. There's no getting around it, especially with Sorber going down, unfortunately. Like, he's going to be put in even more of those situations. And as for Isaiah Joe, I agree with you. I think the movement shooting is big, but just being willing and able to take and make more difficult shots from three, like you mentioned in the playoffs, these things are not going to be as open. It's not going to be swing to the corner and you're open. The last 3 years, he shot 41% from three plus. If that even goes down to 38%, but he's taking and making a few tougher shots just preparing for the playoffs, that is, sort of a gamble and a wager I'm willing to make. So I think that there's still a lot of improvement for both these guys. I love what we saw from Wiggins last year. I mean, if we go back to last season, we were doing these predictions, none of us could have probably imagined the improvement we'd see from Wiggs on some of those things. So I think that both guys are going to remain contributors, but if they can add these small pieces that we're talking about, I think you could have a very big impact.
And then when we go down this list, we're now at the kind of end of the bench type of guys, but we all know that they're going to play because Mark plays 20,000 players a game. But now it gets a little bit more nerdier for me of like AJ Mitchell. Can AJ Mitchell start to knock down these mid-range jumpers at the elbow extended in the mid-range? Because last year he was 60% at the rim. So like the foundation is there as a rookie to be 60% from the rim. The foundation is there to be a really good rim finisher for his position, for his size. And he also got to the free throw line very well when attacking the rim. So I'm comfortable with where he's at the rim. He was 48% on short mid-range jumpers. I'm very comfortable with where that's at. He was 30% on long mid-range, and that brought his total to 45% overall in the mid-range. And overall, you're comfortable with that, but if he can add and refine that long mid-range opportunity for him, then that changes things for his game overall and how consistently he can produce offensively. Because from three, as a rookie, he shot 36%. And I think that that's a really great baseline considering where he's been as a second-round guy heading into last year, that he can – I trust him. I trust him to build on the three. I trust him to build on the rim. To me, that's not kind of out of the ordinary or a ton of pressure that needs to be in those two areas. But if he can bump up in the long mid-range, and now he truly can score at all three levels, he truly can play on and off the ball offensively, and he's a really serviceable defender, then you're talking about a guy who can achieve the bold predictions that we've made on this show of him being a top 8 rotational player for this team come playoff time.
Yeah, I went in a little bit of a different direction of all those things that you trusted. I feel the same way. I went with defense of if he can level up from being serviceable to above average to plus, I think that changes the world for him because you're going to be allowed to put him in a lot more of these lineups where you can have a three guard, Thunder guard, whatever that is, with Shai, AJ, and J-Dub. I think that would make a lot of sense. I think those guys would mesh together really well. So if he can improve defensively, I think that's going to allow for some more lineup versatility. Like you mentioned, Mark is going to play anyone in a Thunder jersey in the arena. You could be a fan, you might get called up. So if AJ can improve defensively, I think that's going to give him that many more reasons to really plug him in deeper and deeper into the rotation of some of these bigger games.
And then I look at Jalen Williams, J. Will. He got more athletic in the NBA. And that's something that we don't ever discuss happening. Like when we're scouting players and talking about draft picks and everything else, everyone will tell you that like you are who you are athletically, except for J. Will. Like he's gotten better and he's gotten more athletic in the NBA. Is there just a little bit more athleticism in him in this season? And that's going to be a tough ask because he's already done something that, not impossible, but inconceivable. He's already done something inconceivable to take a step forward as an athletic being in the NBA, but you saw what an improvement that gave him defensively. And if he can just get a titch better as a vertical presence at the rim, then he is truly the best third big on your roster among any NBA team, because at that point he becomes a really plus high-end drop coverage big. And while that is a specialty and that is not like the switch everything concept, he's never going to be on the floor with 4 bad defenders. So if he is just an exceptional drop coverage big, playing the pick and roll and defending the rim, and at least defending it in the sense of it's not going to look as flashy or as sexy as Chet or Ihart doing it. But if he can consistently deter shots at the rim by walling up and forcing you to alter your jump, your layup at the rim and create more stops that way, then you get all the benefits of playing him against every matchup with his playmaking offensively and his three-point offensively. So is there another step? And it doesn't have to be dramatic, because I think that what's also improved with him athletically is technique. Like just the simple ability to stay vertical and not foul and contest shots at the rim instead of bailing out for these charges every single time. If he can refine that technique as he already has and improve just a touch as an athlete, then you're talking about a really, really, really serviceable to plus defender, and that allows you to utilize him more in this offense and with what he can consistently do on that end that we already kind of take to the bank for his game.
Absolutely. I went on the offensive end actually for improvement, and I'll take it back to a guy of Lou Dort who we talked about, of his transformation of going from a three-point shooter of team just waving him off and going like, just knock yourself out, shoot as many as you want, to a guy that you actively have to close out on. That's what I want to see from J. Will. It's less about the percentages and more about just the reputation of he can't be an afterthought that Shai kicks out to and everyone just turns their back and starts rebounding, even if he shoots at a decent clip. This needs to be a guy, I think, for his improvement to really take another step, that you have to close out, you have to rotate, you have to actually, like, there needs to be somewhat of an alarm going off if he catches a three wide open around, like, the top of the arc. And I think that would be a major piece, not only for him, but for the rest of the team. We already know he's an above-average passer, so if he can add that sort of threat, I think it'd be big.
And I think that if he can just simply add in being closed out to, like you mentioned, it also just highlights his game in general, because the other thing he's great at offensively is playmaking. And if you're closing out to him, you're then having to draw attention to him, you're having to rotate to him, and then that opens up somebody else that he can exploit with his ability to play make and ability to find the open man. And he's the second best passer on this team right now, barring Topic. He could be moved down to third if Topic really hits and plays a lot of minutes. But right now, with what we've seen in the rotation, it's iHeart and it's J. Will, who are elite playmakers in the sense of creation. Now, they have a lot of guys who are capable passers, who can make the next read. But J. Will and iHeart can create the next read, and there's a difference there that he provides. And let's take the last five guys and split them up into 2 and 3 parts. The first two are the rookies, Topic and Barnhizer. Topic, it's all about, can he be a passable defender? Can you get him on the floor and then realize that, hey, he can do the little things to compete. He can put a body on guys. He can shuffle his feet. He doesn't just get blown by. You can't just bring him up to every single pick and roll action. And when you do, we have the talent around him that they can fight over those screens and stay attached to their man and get the matchups that the defense wants instead of the offense wants. And then he's got to do what we expect him to do offensively, where he's an elite playmaker and he's a new breath of fresh air to this half-court offense as a on-ball player and getting to the rim like he did in Summer League. But I think that it all starts with getting on the floor. And how you get on the floor, to me, is defense. And if you can become a passable defender and flanked by all these elite defenders, that would be a big deal, and it would let you utilize your 12th overall pick.
Yeah, you hit everything right on with the defense, so I'll go in another direction because I think that's about all you can say is, what does he do when he doesn't have the ball? Because I think that he is going to be elite as a driver. I think he's going to be good in the pick and roll, but how does he mesh next to some of these guys when he doesn't have the ball in his hands? Can he shoot the three well enough? Can he space the floor? Is he a good cutter? What does he look like when he's not just managing or just handling the ball all the time? Because that's what we saw a lot from him in some of these like youth leagues and Euro League and things that he played in growing up. So what do you look like when that's sort of taken away from you? Because as talented as he is, that he's not going to be one of the top 3 options even of guys handling the ball that you want creating shots for this team among Shai and Dub. So how can he sort of handle the growing pains of settling into that role?
Then with Brooks Barnhizer, the three-point shot. I mean, we've seen guys like J. Will come into this system, have more trust from their coaches, and just trusting these guys to shoot, and it immediately changes their production from 3. And he's going to have the easy shots to do it. He's going to be a guy that no matter what he shoots this whole season, he could shoot 42% from 3. And it's not going to be enough volume. It's not going to be enough of a worry to have defenders close out to him, to have defenders keep tabs on him. He's going to get those gimme opportunities in whatever the small percentages of minutes that he ends up playing. I think his defense is truly elite and will be elite from the word go for his position and his role. 3-point shot, I just wonder what that looks like, and we saw it some in Summer League. Obviously, there's some mechanical things that he needs to clean up on, but the production has to be there as well. So I think that with Brooks, it's 3-point shooting.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to get on the floor because he's a guy who plays hard and he plays good defense and does all those connective things that the Thunder like. But if he can't shoot the 3, that's going to be super limiting. So if he can just make an average amount, like you mentioned, teams are going to see the rookie over there, second-round pick, and not going to close out to him. So if he can just retain his confidence and just keep shooting, keep going through it through the rough patches that most guys are going to have shooting-wise, where you're going to have your slumps, I think it could be a massive deal for him in a way to sort of break into the rotation a little bit more than would be expected.
And the last 3, these are going to be very easy and rapid fire a ball. Oos, it's the same thing we've talked about with Oos since the day he was drafted. Offensive force and just force in general. He's got to be willing to make a mistake. He's got to be willing to mix it up on the glass. He's got to be willing to get to the rim as a cutter and as an on-ball guy, getting to the rim with force, going up strong, getting fouled, getting a bucket, whatever it is. Defensively, I think he's an NBA-level defender. I think that he can be a really, really good defender already, but he can't stay on the floor because he just kind of floats around at times, both in rebound opportunities and in offensive opportunities as a cutter and at the rim. So that's got to improve. It's been the same thing that's got to improve for a couple years now. This has to be the step that he takes. And then for Brendan Carlson, Honestly, I think that Brandon Carlson's the perfect fourth big on this team. There's nothing a two-way big is going to do that unlocks anything for OKC. So I'll look at him from a standpoint of we didn't get to see it a ton. And I'm not saying that he will or won't. I'm just asking the question, can he translate his recovery ability to the NBA? Because at the G League level, he's able to go hedge on screens, pick up a guard, the guard gets a step on him, he flips his hips, goes, recovers, and blocks the shot at the rim. We haven't got to see him do that a ton in the NBA because he hasn't played a ton of minutes in the NBA. So, like, is that a real skill set from him, and thus making him a really good shot blocker and a really good option, even if you get put in a pickle with him defending the ball, as it is in the G League? Can that happen for him at the NBA level? We don't know yet. I just want to see what happens in those minutes that he does get to play this season. And then for Kenrich Williams, just vibe, man. Just have your vibe, have your time. He was in the 67th percentile from three. He was in the 71st percentile from the mid-range last year, but he was in the 52nd percentile at the rim. What if he capitalizes more on those deep paint touches with a defender on his back, one pump fake, go up, and if he can convert more at the rim, then his minutes get even exponentially better. But we know that Kenrich mostly regulated to garbage time and regulated to like condensed stretches of the schedule where you just need bodies.
Yeah, in specific matchups, I am right there with you in terms of the first guy we're going to talk about with Oos. I wrote down force. That's all I had. And I think with him, it's just the willingness to make mistakes of, if you're going to be wrong in a rotation or a shot, be really wrong, but don't try to play right in the middle of not doing anything, but not really doing anything the other way. I think that's where he kind of gets dangerous with those things. So even if you're loud and wrong, like a guy like Poku, I would rather see that than sort of the hesitation of not wanting to screw up per se. So I think that we all know how talented this guy is. It's just a matter of, can he piece it together with those things? So that's going to be interesting. As for Carlson, I'm going to sort of defer to you on some of those things because you know his game more than me, going to the Blue games, talking to those coaches and whatnot. But just more sustainability of, if he comes in, can you knock down those threes? Was it sort of a small sample size as you mentioned, or is he a guy who at the NBA level and NBA pressure under NBA lights, can you knock down threes at a consistent rate? And then for Kenrich, I went in a little bit of a different direction of just continued improvement from the free throw line. He shot a career-high 71.8% from the line last year on 0.6 attempts. It's a small sample size, but his previous career high was his rookie year, which was 68%. Every year in between that, he was under 60%. So if he can get to, let's say, 75-plus-ish, I think he becomes another guy who's another good option for Mark. You mentioned that he's a guy who's sort of like an innings eater, but we saw him in the playoffs with specific matchups. I think he becomes a more viable option if he's a guy that you can play late in sort of crunch time where you don't have to worry about the free throw shooting.
This has been a lot of fun. Go check out Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube, at Michael on Sports across social media, including on Twitter. You can find me at Rylan_Stiles and on Thunder on SI and on Locked On Thunder every single day. Until next week, be good and be good to one another.